This happened when I was little. I think I was in the second grade of elementary school at the time. My mother died when I was very young, so I was raised by my father. I guess that growing up in a household like that made me kind of introverted. When I was in the first year of elementary school, I was bullied relentlessly. So much so that I refused to go to school. If I was at school, I would do everything I could to try to escape. I hated it. My behavior was bad enough to get me sent to live with my mother's side of the family, way out in the countryside. I was living with my grandparents. I really hated the countryside. It was hard to believe that such a place so boring could even exist in the modern world. I felt like it was from another time period. Like, there weren't many kids my age in the area. I think there were only a couple of high school students. It was alright though, since I already got used to my own company. I loved insects back then. I would just go out and go bug catching. I guess that was one good point of living in the countryside. There was an abundance of bugs to hunt for. I guess I spent about half a year in the countryside living like this, and then things changed when I met a woman. She was probably in her late 20s or early 30s. She had long dark hair, and she was beautiful. "Hey, are you on holiday or something? I don't think I've seen you here before," she said. I was kind of shocked because I didn't expect her to speak to me. I noticed that she was gazing at my little plastic insect collecting cage. "Whoa, you got so many, can I take a look?" she called out to me. Well, at that age, talking about insects was pretty much my favorite topic, so I couldn't believe my luck when she said that. I really enjoyed telling her everything I knew about the bugs that I had. She was really complimentary and was hanging on my every word. I had never had another person outside of my family praise me like that before. It was just the best feeling ever. So, from that day forward, I wanted to see her all the time and talk with her about bugs and stuff. She wanted to spend time with me too. We were looking for bugs in a field and even a river. It was great. We would always agree to meet by a stone Jizo monument near the river. I would often speak to my grandfather about her, and he always said that it was someone's daughter in the village and she wouldn't be around long and to leave them alone and to not annoy them. He didn't understand that we were friends. I didn't care. It was just so great to find a friend in such a depopulated area. She was really nice, but she never spoke about herself much. Whenever I told her anything, she would be so happy to hear it. And I told her everything. How I was bullied and how I didn't have a mum, etc. Whenever I complained about something, she had a sympathetic ear. I thought of her as a mother, to be completely honest with you. I even told her that, and she looked very sad for a second. And then she smiled. Sadly, shortly after this, I got sick. At first I thought it was just a cold, and since I didn't have a fever or anything like that, I thought I was well enough to go out and play. I hated not being able to see her, and even when I was sick, I would go down to the usual meeting place to wait for her. But as my illness got worse and worse, my grandpa noticed. I was told to rest at home, but it didn't help at all. Even when I was forced to rest in bed, I wouldn't stop asking about her. I really wanted to see her. I kept on and on about her so much that my grandpa phoned her family home to ask for her. I remember thinking that Grandpa was off of the phone very quickly. He came back into my bedroom with a concerned look on his face. "Hey, you. Who you been playing with? Because it sure ain't the woman I thought. She didn't come back this summer. Do you even know the name of the woman you've been going around with? What kind of person have you been seeing?" I really panicked. I hated being cornered and told off. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't remember her name, and in fact, we didn't even ask each other our names. We had so many other fun things to talk about. Well, Grandpa couldn't believe that, and he demanded to know what she looked like, so I did my best to describe her appearance. Once I did, Grandpa stormed out of the room and back towards the phone. I wondered what the hell the problem was, but now I'm older I realized why he was concerned. We lived way out in the middle of nowhere, and we didn't really get too many strangers in town. Everyone knew one another and one another's business. By the end of the night, no one had a clue who that woman was, and I think my grandparents started to suspect. that she might not have ever existed. They told me to stop going to meet her, and because I was really ill at the time and I could barely move from the bed, I had little other choice. After a while, I got a little better, and I was allowed to play outside my grandparents' house. I always kept an eye out for my friend, even though I knew I would be in so much trouble if I was seen with her. I missed her. A while passed, and I ended up playing in the back garden of my grandparents' home. And then, when I realized they weren't paying attention to where I was anymore, I went into the field behind the back garden. There was a hole in the fence, and I could sneak into the field and back out to the garden pretty easily. The field had a lot more places to search for bugs, and because I got better, I returned to bug hunting since there wasn't really that much else to do. I was engrossed in looking under the leaves of a small shrub when I heard someone call my name. It wasn't either of my grandparents. It was my friend. She was back. I was so happy that she came to go bug hunting with me. I was too overjoyed to ask her any of the things my grandpa asked me all those months ago. I was just a kid. I saw that my grandparents spotted me from the window, and I waved at them, and they waved back. Everything was all right again in my little world, it seemed. At dinner time, I said to my grandpa, "Hey, you saw us bug hunting today, right? Why didn't you come say hello to her?" My grandparents stopped eating and looked at me. "You were playing alone, unless she went off somewhere far, and you know you're not supposed to do that, but I didn't see you with her." Their looks of concern didn't fade, and my grandpa went to the phone again, but this time to call my father. He came back and uttered the most heartbreaking sentence I've ever heard. "Look, I'm really sorry, but you're gonna have to go back to your dad." My heart sunk. So I was being sent away. I guess that's because they thought I was imagining some woman, or I really didn't know. I had about a week to think of all the reasons why I was being sent away. And during that time, I wasn't even allowed to go outside. I missed my friends so much, and I hated being indoors after being sick all that time. I was really sad. I sat on the porch of my grandparents' home waiting for my dad to come and take me away. I remember just crying my eyes out and demanding to be there on that porch because I just wanted to see her one last time. And then, there she was. She appeared out of nowhere. She crouched down and spoke to me. "What's the matter?" Choking on the lump in my throat and fighting back the tears welling in my eyes, I told her that I had to go. "Oh no, don't cry. It's a good thing. I'll be supporting you, just from a distance." I asked her if I would ever see her again, and she looked down and shook her head. My heart ached. It was the first friend I made in my life. The first person who ever wanted to talk to me for me being me. She waved goodbye to me with this big smile and walked on out of the garden and out of my life. After that, I went home and back to school, and I didn't get bullied again. I felt so much better, like a weight had been lifted. I felt like I was enjoying life for the first time. I understood the beauty of the word normal, and I felt like I could be described as it. After I went away, we didn't get to go back that often. And with age came wisdom, and I learned a few things about the area I used to play in. That particular area had been kind of infamous in the past for disappearances, especially child disappearances. Some old texts and rumors say that kids who don't make a whole lot of friends were the ones to disappear, you know, the loners. I even heard that some of the kids before they disappeared were sick for a bunch of days, for some unknown reason. But given all that, I don't care. I never saw her again, and I never knew who she was, but she's so important to me though. She might have been a ghost. She might have wanted to spirit me away. She might have been protecting me from being spirited away. She might have been an everyday person, as real as you or I. I don't know. It's a little scary now I'm older and I think back on it, but when I was younger, I felt nothing but love for her. She was like the mother I never had and I always wanted. This happened a couple of dozen years ago, but I'll never forget it. Thanks for listening. This happened about 5 years ago, when I was a high school student. It was summer and a friend of mine from an after-school club came up to me and said, "Hey, I heard from one of the guys about this place that's supposed to be haunted. Everyone's going later. You in?" Hell yes, I was in. I loved anything spooky at that age. So that night at about 7 o'clock we headed to the location. There were 9 of us in total. We all went to the same club and often hung out together. We were heading to the middle of nowhere. There was nothing but flat lands and fields as wide as the eye could see. It was going to be developed into a bunch of new houses. I was all like, "Where the hell are we going, guys?" And then someone replied, "To the park." I started to doubt the existence of this park in this desolate area. But we found it after a few more fields. It was completely run down and I bet that it was hardly ever used. All you could hear were insects of the night. It was weird to see empty fields and the partially leveled grounds all around, and then a park smack bang in the middle. It was a little spooky. There was no reason why it shouldn't have been leveled for all the planned construction. Once we got there, my friend started to tell us about the alleged haunting. He said that the swing in the park swings by itself even on days where the wind doesn't blow. I expected to see it maybe slightly sway in the wind, but something crazy happened. It was like it was being violently thrown around in anger by some unseen force. It was amazing. I didn't expect to see anything like that. I thought that it just might be a trick or something. I looked at the guys to see if any of them were, pulling some fishing line or something. I looked over and they were as shocked as I was. I carefully looked at their hands and legs to see if they were moving with the same rhythm of the swing, but they weren't. One of my friends said, "Whoa, let's take a video," and went to pull his phone out of his pocket. He aimed his phone at the swing, and then something really weird happened. The moment he pointed it at the swing, his phone went flying as if someone had slapped it out of his hand. We stood there completely dumbstruck. Any of my friends were planning this prank, then they might have just smashed his phone. I realized that it wasn't a prank. It was real. Everyone looked completely shocked. My friend stooped to pick up his phone in silence, and then we heard a terrible scream. We just bolted it out of there. The screams only seemed to get louder and louder the further away we got from that park. The voiceless screams followed us for about 5 minutes, I swear. We burst into a nearby convenience store to take refuge from what just happened. The store was busy and it served as a welcome distraction. We bought some drinks to calm down. The friend who told us the rumor looked the most worried. He said that he wasn't even sure that we had gone to the right park. It was all a confusing mess. During that summer, everyone talked about that park. All the kids wanted to go there, and myself and my friends went back a couple of times, to be honest. Nothing else really happened, and the rumors just kind of died down. One thing you might find interesting is that a couple of years later, after graduating, I ran into one of the friends who was there that day, the guy whose phone got smacked out of his hand. He said that when he was running away, he looked back, and I guess he was the only one to do so because no one else mentioned this. He said he saw a person with long limbs like a stick insect. He said that it was chasing us, and it seemed like it was almost dancing, teetering, turning and twisting, almost falling at times. The image of a person with long, spindly limbs really sends shivers up my spine. I'm really glad I didn't get to see it. When I was in elementary school, I joined a camping trip for 2 nights hosted by the school during summer vacation. The campsite was about 2 hours from the nearest town. It was a proper camping trip. Even though it was technically a campsite, it wasn't very well maintained. There was a kitchen and a bathroom, and that was good because at least it wasn't just the tents, you know? But the place wasn't in great shape. Everything was dated and kind of shabby. The toilet was more of an outhouse, to be honest. It was way out in a field. The campsite was really close to some swampland, and on the other side was a cliff. Even as a kid, I remember thinking, this is a really unsafe place to camp. We had plenty of activities available, such as hiking and fishing in the day, and campfire and doing dares at night. On the first night I was there, I took up one of these dares. I thought it would be a simple dare, but it was different to the ones I did that age. We call them tests of courage, and you know, they're not usually this intense. This was a dare that was created by the teachers, by the way. And it went like this. Go into the woods at night without a flashlight alone and stay there for a while. There were rules to this dare too. If you start running or you scream, you'll alert the wild animals and become one of the kids who go missing around here. This is what the teachers said. I can understand that they were trying to make it fun for us, and I'm pretty sure that we were perfectly safe, but looking back on it, I guess that was kind of strange. We were told to stand there, in the woods, with no light, in complete darkness, and in complete silence, until one of the teachers came back to get us. Even though I didn't really want to do this, I went along with him. I was somewhere far from home and far from civilization in the mountains. I was a pretty obedient kid. So I walked with the teachers and their flashlights out into the middle of the woods. It was so dark, and all I could hear was the sound of insects and the slow sigh of the trees. We got to where I guess was the designated spot, and the teachers' flashlights went off, and I heard them trudge away over broken branches and through thickets of weeds and bush. When that flashlight went off, there was nothing but darkness all around. There should have been other kids close by doing the dare with me, but I couldn't hear anyone else. I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or if they were closed. It was that dark. The air was acrid and warm. It seemed to cling to my skin. I heard the occasional rustle of bushes and the call of the wild. Some unknown animal was barking in the distance. I hoped that it was the distance. It was hard to say if it was near or far. I guess in reality, I was only out there for a few moments. No longer than 5 minutes at tops, I guess. But those moments felt so long. It was so isolating. I felt completely alone in the world. Then the flashlights came out of nowhere and came straight towards me. I was relieved that they were back and I wasn't alone anymore. We all headed back to the campsite together. Our teachers were saying, "Oh, we're all lucky that we didn't see anything creepy this year." We were joking, and I guess I felt kind of brave and mature. It was good. The rest of the night was pretty uneventful, to be honest. The next day, I noticed that my friend who did the dare, around the same time as I did, was looking awfully frightened. She was looking towards the cliffs, and when I asked what happened, she just replied, "Can't you see them?" I looked at her puzzled. "Come take a look." She took me to the edge of the field towards the cliffs. "Look down there." I looked down there and I couldn't see what she was talking about. There was nothing but a flowing stream down below. But my friend looked like she was on the verge of tears. "The kids with red faces down there, can't you see them?" She said that she could see a girl and a boy that I couldn't. She was shouting and crying. It clearly had upset her. Soon after, the teachers came over to see what all the fuss was about and to try and console her, but just like me, they couldn't see what she was talking about. I was worried about my friend, but life on the campsite carried on, and as you know, kids have short memories and attention spans. I guess we all got distracted and forgot about it. Later that night, I was really tired, but a lot of the other kids were still awake and still lively. I was snug in my sleeping bag and on the verge of sleep. I heard them whispering excitedly and happily, in the glow of the lamplight. And just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard the tone of the kids around me shift. Excitement gave way for tension, and I heard them whisper, "Are you okay? Wait, let me go get the teacher." I popped my head out of the sleeping bag and I saw two girls leaning over another girl sat on the floor leaning forward. The girl on the floor was complaining of pain. "It hurts. It's so heavy. Help me," she said. She was complaining of feeling crushed, and right before our eyes she folded. Her chin was nearly touching the floor. It was as if something heavy was on her back. She cried and she screamed, and everyone in the tent was panicked. It was one of those huge outdoor tents, by the way. Everything was happening so fast, it was so stressful. Everyone was so frightened. I never heard screaming like that before. The teachers came rushing in, and one had a bottle of salt in their hand. He sprinkled it everywhere and started hitting the girl in the back with his palm, and miraculously, the girl stopped crying and screaming. She was up on her feet like nothing had happened. After that, nothing else of note really happened. We went home without issue. On the bus home, I spoke with some of my friends and other groups of kids I weren't friendly with about what happened. Some kids had different experiences. One said that when they went to the outhouse at night, there was a kid they didn't know stood stock still, staring at them. Another kid said that they saw shadows everywhere they looked, humanoid shadows. I was really surprised that there were more experiences. The mountains are a truly unusual place. My friend who saw those kids with the red faces has been kind of mountain phobic since that trip. I can't even remember why I wanted to go on that trip. It feels like some vague half memory, like it was some liminal space. This happened about 5 years ago, and back then I was really interested in photography. Whatever time I could take off work, I used to go traveling to take photos. It was autumn, and I had planned to visit a rural village that lied in the shadow of the mountains. I could already imagine the color of the leaves, and I was really looking forward to it. The area was very traditional. In that, I mean that it was kind of like looking into a picture from the past. It was a proper rural agricultural village, and my eyes bulged at its beauty. My head was brimming with ideas for photos. When I say it's a rural village, I'm not talking about a couple of fields. The mountains that stood over it were truly beautiful. There was some kind of eccentricity to this village I couldn't put my finger on. I tend to look for beauty in unusual places. I remember that there were some flatlands where beautiful yellow flowers I hadn't seen before were growing. They hadn't been leveled or cut, they were just there, in their own patch growing, and I loved that. The forest floor was littered with fallen autumn leaves. I was fascinated by my surroundings. I wanted to immerse myself in nature. I sat down on the forest floor for a while. On my first day in the village, I decided to stroll through the forest to shoot some photos. I got a little away from the village, and I found a natural path in the forest which led to the mountains. The path twisted left and right, and there were these huge boulders littering the way, like buttons on a giant's coat. I went up the path, and there was a clear barrier between me and the trail to the mountains. It was a rope, tied at waist height. Here in Japan, they're called shimenawa, and you might have seen this kind of rope at shrines, as it usually is at an entrance to mark its sacred nature. The thing is, in public places like shrines, they aren't tied at waist height. They're usually high up, allowing people to pass underneath them. Not this one though, it was intentionally either stopping people from going any further, or stopping something else from coming any further, depending on which way you looked at it, or what side of the rope you were on. I found it very interesting, and I wanted to push on and climb over it, but since the sun was setting, I decided not to brave the unknown, and I headed back to my inn. Later that night, I asked the innkeeper about the path I had found in the mountains. He told me not to go back there. He said that it wouldn't be a good idea to cross over that rope and head further up the mountain, as many people have been known to disappear on that path. I thought about it, and maybe the innkeeper was just saying that to keep me out of there, since I wasn't a local. Or he had heard so many stories from the villagers, which made him believe that the mountain was kind of off limits to anybody. I thought that there wasn't much to his story, so the next day, I headed back up there again, without telling anyone where I was going. I headed up there early, but everyone was already awake. I had to wait for the villagers to stop watching me that morning before I could make my move. Word travels fast through the village, I guess. I was heading back up that path, and I was thinking, nothing happens when you go past that rope. It's fine, it's just a mountain. Once I passed the rope, the mountain path and its surroundings seemed to double in its beauty, yet the path remained the same, like it had been walked many times before. It seemed quite a depressing path. I was walking along as if I were in a dream. The scenery was the same either side of the path. I grew a bit nervous. I was worried about getting lost. After a short while, I found a body of water. It was kind of like a swamp, mixed with a stream. So I started heading up the path, keeping parallel with that body of water. That way, I could always follow it back down. After a while, the path gave way to the natural barrier that was the mountain. I was kind of disappointed, to be honest. I figured there wasn't much else worth checking out, and I almost decided to head back, but that was when I noticed it. Alongside the steep mountain face was a hollow indent, and there was a house built into that mountain face. Well, it wasn't a modern house. Maybe a hut or a lodge would be a more accurate description, come to think of it. The walls were white, and it had a tiled roof. It looked like it was in pretty decent condition too. I felt that someone could have come out of that lodge at any moment, so I didn't want to get caught on what I guessed was their property since I passed through the rope. So I turned on my heels and I got out of there. I headed back down towards the village. Halfway back to the inn, I was suddenly stopped by a person calling out to me. Ah, shit. I felt guilty. I had just been caught doing something I shouldn't, so I clammed up, and I didn't say a word. I turned around to see what kind of trouble I was in. I saw an old guy that I recognized. He was the guy who lived across from the inn. I said hello to him a couple of times. He was sat on top of a big rock, and he told me off, and I deserved it. He said that there were bears out here. I apologized a bunch of times, and I told him I would head back down the mountain right away. He said he would take me back. He shouted at me about how lucky I was that I didn't go any further. He said that there were things out there worse than bears too. That's when I noticed he was holding a gun in his hand. I asked, "What's the gun for?" And he smiled and said, "Just self-defense." He was a trapper, and he said that he's never once used the gun, but knowing what he knew about that area, he said it would be a stupid idea not to bring the gun each time he went past the rope because of the bears. He said that the bears have always been there. People who do what I did are the ones who go missing. Sometimes it's not a cryptid or a missing 411 story. Sometimes it's people like me who willfully ignore the rules. And if it wasn't for that guy, I might not be here typing this. On the other hand, though, maybe they made up the whole thing about the bears to keep me away from that lodge. Either way, that guy had a gun, and there was potentially wild bears out there. Seems like a miracle that I got off that mountain alive.